Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Journalist Talk. And today we have Jesse Merrick, and he's a sports interpreter for News 3 Las Vegas. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm excited to hop on with you.
Yeah, of course. First of all, what I always ask to all my guests is to give us like brief biography about your life all the way up where you're now in your career.
Yeah. Definitely. So originally from Ventura, California, had played sports my whole life. Played college football at Azusa Pacific University, a Division II school, and that's kind of the timeline of where my love for sports came about. And then while I was at Azusa Pacific, I started studying broadcast journalism and wanted to find a way to break into the industry. And so I started working at a couple stations in town, but was at ABC7 in Los Angeles for about 2 years. Working in multiple roles, and then I finally got my first break. Got a job in Grand Junction, Colorado, where I was the sports anchor, the weekend sports anchor there for 2 years. Loved it, covered a lot of really cool stuff. And then from there, went to Huntsville, Alabama as the sports director, and I was there for 2 years. Same deal, a lot of stuff, not an area that I ever expected I would want to live or that I would live, but enjoyed every minute of it. Got to cover a couple national championships with the University of Alabama, and that was pretty cool for a kid from California to see how football is done in the South. And then from there, got a job out here in Las Vegas, where I've been for the last 3.5 years, covering all things Vegas sports, which is a lot more than I think a lot of people and even myself thought. There's so much that comes to town here, and now it's growing in such a scale. It's pretty crazy. There's no other sports market like it in terms of the different teams and stuff that keep popping up and keep moving out here. But, primarily for us, it's the Golden Knights and the Las Vegas Raiders in the NFL.
What do you cover there? What all of those sports are? I know you cover football, right? Hockey sometimes that I see on social media.
Yeah, cover a little bit of everything, honestly. Football and hockey are our number two, just because are our top two, because those are the big things we do out here. But for the most part too, we cover basketball because we have the Las Vegas Aces, the WNBA team out here. On top of that, we also have UNLV, and their program is one that's a storied program, and it's kind of fallen on tough times over the last handful of years as it's been like a middle of the road team, but one that the fans are still very passionate about. So, basketball, again, big for us. Vegas is a big basketball town. We cover baseball. I mean, to be completely honest, we cover a little bit of everything because there's just so much out here. But then on top of that, UFC, boxing, all the different events that come into town for that. Formula One is coming here soon. We actually just got a Major League Lacrosse team. It's pretty wild. On top of that, a G League team is now going to be moving out here for next year, so we're going to be covering professional basketball in that sense as well. It's just kind of one thing after another. More and more teams just continue to pop up out here.
And do you have something that you consider your favorite to cover, and which reason would that be?
Yeah, definitely football for me. Just having the history with playing in college, and that sport just being my favorite of all the ones that I've ever played, covered, whatever it is. I grew up in a baseball family, so baseball was my first love. But as soon as I started playing football, and I remember, honestly, when I was a kid, I started playing the Madden video games and was, enthralled with football. I loved it, and it kind of latched on, and that's where, the love affair with football kind of really took off, became what it is today. But, yeah, football is my favorite one to cover. I love covering all sports, but, football is at the top of my list, especially the NFL. I really enjoyed covering college football when I was in Alabama, but I've realized that I can cover the NFL and also still maintain being a fan of the NFL, whereas when I covered college football, it was a little harder for me to still kind of hold on to being a fan. So now, covering the NFL, I'm able to watch college football purely as a fan, so I love that aspect of it.
And which one is at the bottom of your list?
Bottom of the list? Ooh, man, that's a tough one. Let's see. I don't mean this as a knock on any of the teams that I cover. I've just never been a big soccer guy. That's not my. I know you're a soccer fan. I know we've talked before. For me, it's never been a sport that's been very big in my life, but I still enjoy covering it. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not bought into it, I think, as much as, some other people that have played and other people that are fans. But with that, I'm able to kind of enjoy the moments that I do cover it because I don't do it as often. We just had some massive soccer matches that came out here in Vegas, actually. It was just cool to see the atmosphere with those things, and that's more so what I appreciate with that. Just simply because I don't have the experience having played soccer and growing up in a soccer family like that.
Yeah, I am super soccer, as you know. But yeah, I even got a little late because my mom sent me like some jerseys from Manchester City.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah.
Yeah, I can appreciate it for what it is. Like I said,
Yeah.
it's one of those of like the major sports out there. One of the ones that I just haven't been able to get into to follow it, religiously like I do a lot of the other sports.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
So I was gonna ask, you have like any plans to cover the World Cup, or like since you are not that close to soccer, so.
Oh, I mean, I would love to cover those events. Don't get me wrong. Just and when I say I don't enjoy it, like I mean, it's more so at the bottom of my list of like, if I'm like, oh hey, I want to go cover this, but like I still enjoy covering the event that those matches are and things like that. So for me, covering a World Cup would be incredible because that's something that's up there, in terms of a massive event, like the Super Bowl, like the World Series, the NHL, the Stanley Cup Finals, all those different things like that. Like that's an event that would be awesome. I have a couple friends that have gone as fans, and they've said how incredible it is. So that's one I definitely would want to check off the list for sure. Again, I wouldn't know as much as I do about many of the other sports that I cover, but I would love to cover something like that.
Yeah, I always told my mom that I would be graduated by the time to cover the World Cup 2022, but here I am. I'm not working right now. I'm just like doing that and applying for my master's, but maybe the next one.
Maybe you got time. They come around every couple of years too, so you feel up more opportunities.
And I think the next one's gonna be here in the United States, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. The upcoming one is there's a bunch of sites. We thought Vegas was gonna get one for a while, but it didn't end up getting it. So.
Well, I'm gonna be closer to cover that one. Yeah, I saw on our post at the RTDNA the last time that we interviewed you, maybe like a year and a half ago.
Uh-huh.
And you were a sports news anchor and reporter at the place that you're now, and right now your bio on Instagram says that you're a sports interpreter. Is there any difference, or is just like a different name for the same job? No,
it's just me trying to be funny, saying that I interpret sports for people. It's my job. My title is still sports reporter or sports anchor. It's just me being different and trying to be funny.
There you go.
To say
same job.
Yeah.
What would you say that it's the best story you covered in the past 2 years now with COVID?
Honestly, I think just like with the thing, like during COVID, all of that stuff when it was going on, we were talking to so many people when sports just weren't even going on. And what people were doing, and specifically here in Vegas, around the country, really, as it's become legalized in a lot of cities. But sports gambling, that was one thing. Is a lot of people out here in Vegas, obviously, was the first place to legalize it, in the U.S. And so there were so many people that are avid sports gamblers, and when there wasn't games going on, they didn't know what to do. And so I talked to a friend of mine out here who works in gambling. She's a professional gambler, talks about it all the time. Her name's Kelly. I blank it on her last name, but Kelly in Vegas is what she goes by. And, we talked to her about, what she was gambling on. And I remember her telling me that they were finding, like Russian table tennis or Nicaraguan soccer, that was still going on during the pandemic. And sports that they knew, nothing about. And I mean, obviously they understand soccer, but they didn't know anything about the teams, the players, all that stuff. And so they're calling people up in these countries trying to learn as much as they possibly can. And I remember she jokingly said, about the Russian table tennis, she's like, I don't know who's who, but I'm just going with the guy whose name sounds like the vodka. Because, that was her line on, like, how to do it. So that was one, honestly, that stuck out to me. But there were so many great stories, throughout the pandemic and stuff that, I covered just trying to figure out, how people were getting by. We talked to another player, Nick Kingham. He was a guy with ties to Vegas who went and was playing Taiwanese baseball. And for him, his story about going out there, he actually missed Korean baseball. Sorry, he was in the Korean baseball league. He missed COVID and a lot of the lockdowns in the U.S. because he was leaving right as all that was happening here. And when he got to Korea, things were kind of being lax because their numbers were moving up. But for him, he was one of the few people that was playing professional baseball at that time in the world, and for him and what that experience was like. And he started on opening day as ESPN picked up the coverage of that to try and, get people to be able to watch some sports, and that was just such a big thing for him. So that was another one that stuck out. After that, covering all the different sports that we cover with COVID protocols and all the different things and the hoops that everyone had to jump through, in order to stay healthy, to get things done. And much like we're doing things on Zoom, that became such a normal part of our lives, that before it was always like, well, how the heck would we do this if we can't sit down and interview people? But now, the industry has changed, and Zoom is, accepted as a way to do a lot of interviews and things like that. And so it's expanded the industry in that sense too, and allowed people to do a lot more stuff virtually.
Yeah, I feel like people didn't think virtual meetings would be like credible for information for some reason, but right now it's totally normal. We've been doing this for 2 years now, and even for small things like the club, my podcast is still small. It's very interesting to see like how we adapted to this online system, and now we are going out of it, but at the same time, like, we kind of prefer it. Because, you can be at the comfort of your house and I can be at mine, and it's still like an interview.
Yeah. It's become the norm a lot more. Like you said, people prefer it because it makes things easier, and think about how many people that aren't in our industry that are now working remotely that had never done that before, and it is crazy. That's one of those things where, we lived through and are still kind of coming out of a pandemic here that is going to go down in history for changing, so many things about the way that the world, operates and stuff like that. That's one of those things where it's going to be interesting to see, the lasting impact that it's had. Hopefully some positives that we can pull out of it later on. And that's where the virtual aspect of a lot of things maybe kind of took that next step. I personally, though, you can't replace, face to face, being with somebody. But man, in place of it, this is as good as it gets, for stuff like this, to be able to do interviews and things like that.
Yeah, for the first season of my podcast, I only did online interviews because it was still last year, so people were more afraid than they are right now. And it was so different when I had my first face-to-face interview. I was like, whoa, that's so much more fun. It's different because I was even talking to one of my guests, is the connection that you have with your guest is different through Zoom and in person. And I feel like this also counts in journalism when you're interviewing someone for like a story or something.
That's true, because it makes it harder to, you can only read so much emotions through a camera, It's different when you can see, and you can read more of the nonverbals and things like that when someone's right in front of you, and the interaction is a bit more immediate, or you don't have to rely on quick Wi-Fi or things like that, to make sure that it all works out, or like, the battery on your phone or computer dying. But yeah, being in person, it is wild because essentially we're doing the same thing we would if we were in person, but it's wild how, our brains process things differently when the person's sitting right in front of you.
Yeah, I feel like there's more pressure when you are with someone in person. That's just like interesting how we change it, everything that we knew to something new. I wanted to ask how hard was to become like a sports journalist, because I feel like it's one of the most competitive areas of journalism.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, because if you think about it, for even just for people in the field of journalism, at most stations, they probably have, let's say, at minimum, 5 news reporters, but it's anywhere from 5 to 10, 15, some large stations, 20 of them. If you look at the weather department, usually there's at the very least 4 to 5 of them as well. You have your morning crew, your evening crew, your weekend crew, and weekend mornings as well. So around 4 people or so in that department. Whereas in sports, most local TV stations in particular only going to have 2. Some of them only have 1. And in small markets, it's usually 2. There are some large markets out there that only have 1. It's pretty rare nowadays to find a station that has 3 different people or more in a sports department. I can only count a few that I know of that still have 3 or more. 1, in the numbers game, you're already fighting against that, and 2, like, let's be honest, like, it's sports, it's fun, so a lot of people want to do it. So you're competing against so many more people for so much less jobs and opportunities that are out there. But having said that, there's so many different avenues to go. You don't need to go the local TV news route to get it. You can start a podcast. You can do something on YouTube. You can create your own thing. You can do a blog. I mean, there's so many opportunities and ways to do it, especially if you want to do it in like the visual medium with video and things like that. I tell people all the time, like you're doing right now, if you want to be in the sports business or whatever business it is, that it's a media business, start your own thing while you can and do that part of it. And then that's going to give you the reps of interviewing people and being on camera and doing all that stuff. It is a very, very competitive field. It took me a long time to get my first opportunity on air, 2 years to be exact. I graduated. And, part of that is because I was working on my reel and working on myself. But I was also being a little more picky. I didn't want to just go to any market. I wanted to make sure it was the right market for me. But 2 years is a long time. I know a lot of people that graduated and had a job waiting for them, or they graduated, worked for a month or two, and then got their first on-air job. For me, that wasn't the case. And I'm honestly happy that it wasn't, because looking back in hindsight, it helped me learn, so much more of the business from behind the scenes before I started doing it on air. And then after that, everyone tells you, oh, the hardest part is getting the first job. Well, that's not exactly true, because as you continue to move up and try and get more jobs, there's still just as many people trying to do it and trying to get that job, and even less opportunities, because obviously as you climb the ladder, you're going to want and you're going to try to, take a bigger job. And those are the things where I think it's easy to gloss over that and miss those opportunities, because there's so many people that are trying to get those jobs.
Yeah, and why do you think, especially in sports journalism, there's less opportunity than any other area?
Yeah, honestly, it's just because stations, in the local news area aren't willing to invest in sports, widely across the board. Usually that's the first thing to go when layoffs happen and things like that. Our station in particular had 3 sports people when we went through layoffs, but they got rid of our third person in our department. And I've seen it happen in a lot of different markets at other stations. Sports is usually one of the first things to go, because I think a lot of them, I think they're wrong for this, but they don't think that sports is a driver for getting people to tune in, or that there's not money to be made there. However, I think it's one of the very untapped areas that local news is missing out on, that they can sell from an ad standpoint, from sales and whatnot, to do that. So I think that's one reason why, it's not invested in, and so there's not as many opportunities there. But again, just because there's so many people that want to do it, that makes it tough. There's a lot of people that obviously want to be news reporters and weather anchors and things like that, and are entertainment reporters, whatever it is. But sports is one of those things where it draws so many people in that it's a very popular field for people in the media business to get into. So again, it's that numbers game of so many people but so few opportunities, because some stations aren't willing to invest.
Yeah, to be honest, I started in journalism because I wanted to do sports journalism. But then it was like, in Brazil, it's already hard being a woman journalist wanting to do sports. You get into school and everybody tells you you're not going to get it or something like that. And so I kind of stopped dreaming a little about sports journalism. I keep watching games and stuff because it's like something that it's interesting to me. But at the same time, I feel like I found myself doing not news also, but more entertainment. Like this, it's kind of like a host show. It's fun. I like to do this podcast, and I can talk about like any area of journalism that I want, because I can interview a lot of people about it.
Exactly. That opens the field of, people you can pull from to talk to. And that's the thing, is like not limiting it to just sports or just news or just entertainment, whatever it is. It lets you to dive into so many topics. And like, let's be honest too, like you, me, all these different people that you can talk to, like we're more than just a sports journalist or just a news reporter, whatever it is. There's so much more to it, where we all have much more interests. And so that allows you to tap into a lot of your other interests. And you never know where that'll lead you in a podcast or with all of this stuff, so that makes it a lot more exciting, I think.
Yeah, I feel like this podcast, I want to talk more about the careers, but I end up meeting even more like the people that I'm interviewing. I interviewed some of my professors, and the whole time that I was interviewing, I was shocked with so many new information and nice stuff that the professor does, because we just know like the person that is teaching you for like an hour every day, and that's it. But it's really, really fun. And doing this, it's something that you always wanted to do, being a journalist, talking about sports, or you had another dream in your life?
When I was growing up, I didn't really, I wasn't one of those kids that was like, I knew exactly what I was going to do, at a super young age. I think even when I got to college, I had an idea of what I wanted to do, going in my freshman year, but I wasn't like completely sold on it. When I first started, I was still trying to kind of figure that out. I went in with the major my school didn't have broadcast journalism. We had communication studies, and I had an emphasis in media studies at the time, and later added a journalism minor. Later on in my career, or in my college career, I guess you could say. But, I always kind of knew that was the area I wanted to go. But for me, honestly, growing up, I always knew I wanted to be in sports in some way. Obviously, as a young kid, your dream is to be a professional athlete. Who wouldn't want to do that job? You get paid a ton of money to play a game, that you love. And, that lifestyle that comes with it. But I learned very quickly that that wasn't going to happen for me, which is fine. And so I was like, okay, how do I stay in sports? And for me, I enjoy, one, covering sports, but telling cool stories, as it pertains to sports and athletes and stuff. And this is an opportunity to do just that. And so that's kind of what led me to it. And I think once I really got a taste of it, again, I from my freshman year on, I was always like working towards, hey, I'm going to be a sports journalist. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until the summer of my junior year that I was able to get my first internship, because back then, now this isn't the case. Kids get internships at like any age, but a lot of stations wouldn't let you come on as an intern until you were a junior. So for me, the summer of my junior year, I had my first internship at Fox 11, and it was the most basic internship in the world. I didn't leave the station. I didn't get to go to games or anything like that. All I did was sit there and log games and help produce and watch the sports segment. But I was hooked from that moment on. I mean, I as soon as I got to do that, I was like, this is what I want to do. I can't wait. And then I got my first internship at ABC7, and they let me go out to the games and interview people and do all those things. The first night I was doing it, I got to interview Kobe, and it just kind of ignited that fire even more in me to want to go do this. And so really since then until now, I've been, chasing that dream of continuing to push the limit and do that. And now that I'm in it, I love my job. But I think now for me, I would love at some point to transition to more of a play-by-play role at live games, because, I've noticed, as much as I love what I do now and as enjoyable as it is for me, the thing that I really love is being at the games, the energy that you get from it. So that's something I'm trying to position myself to create opportunities for myself to, do some play-by-play and build a reel in that sense to see where that could take me.
Oh, that's very, very nice. You kind of answered like my next question, which would be like, what future plan do you have for your career? But you kind of answered that. And I was wondering if you have like any advice for journalists that are coming out right now, like they're getting into college, how college can help them, or like me, graduate now and looking for jobs, because you're already in the area and you've spent 2 years trying to get like the right place for you. I mean, I would say that you have a successful career so far, so you did something right along those lines.
I'm still figuring some things out, but I've definitely learned a lot over the years. And honestly, before you're graduating, I would take advantage of any and all reps you can possibly get with things like this, like a podcast, or doing those things, or practicing, live. You obviously can't do live shots unless you have a local show that you do, or things like that. But just practicing doing stand-ups or whatever it is that you want to do, practice that. Do it on your own, whether it's in the mirror or in a setting like this where you post things on YouTube, Spotify, whatever the heck it is. And then, when you're looking for a job, you figure out what makes you different from everyone. Because again, this is a competitive field and there's so many people that want to do this. You got to figure out something that makes you different, that separates you from the pack. If you're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, you're probably doing it wrong. Everything shouldn't look the same. So figure out what makes you different and really exemplify that would be my advice to, people coming out. And then also to just stay the course and stick with it. It's so hard to get into the business. So a lot of people can get discouraged. Again, it was me for 2 years looking for my first job in Grand Junction. And then when I left Grand Junction, looking for my next job in Huntsville. And then when I left Huntsville, I was unemployed for 6 months before I got this job here in Vegas now. And so it was one of those things where it would have been very easy for me to just leave and start doing something else. I don't knock anybody for doing it. We've all got a life that we got to live, and mouth we got to feed. People got to figure out a way to get a paycheck. But I think for me, a big reason why I've outlasted some of my peers is simply because I've kept going. And if this is really what anyone wants to do, you have to keep going and keep grinding and, work the extra hours, whatever it is. And as cliche as all that is, like, that's what's going to give you the staying power in this, because there's too many people out there that say they're willing to do the work, but really won't. So if you're someone that is willing to do the work and willing to push through all the no's, it's eventually going to happen. Just keep going, whoever it is that wants to do this.
That would be like the same advice that you're going to take to get to the next step in your career that you want. Just like keep pushing and doing whatever you have to do, extra hours, study a little more if you have to.
That's the thing. I mean, look, no matter what it is you're learning or trying to get, like if it's easy, then everybody would do it. You know what I mean? I mean, we'd have millions of sports anchors out there if it were an easy thing to do or easy thing to get into. It's like learning a different language. That's obviously hard. You're not just going to all of a sudden figure it out in a week. It takes time. And, so that this is no different, where I think, people need to continue working on their craft and things like that as well. For me, even in the business, I've been doing this now on air since 2012, so 10 years. I graduated in 2012 from college. I didn't start on air till 2014, so 8 years that I've been on air now, which makes me feel old saying that. But I'm still continuing to grow. There's still things that I work on when I'm on TV. I'll go back and watch something that I did, and I'm like, oh man, that wasn't very good. I need to do this instead, or oh, this was good. This is why it was good. There's so many different things, and I'm now going to start doing a little more storytelling at work, and that's not something that I've done in a while. I've done it in the past, and I've done it very well, I think, and other people that I've interviewed with have really loved my storytelling, and that's something that I'm going to have to figure out that muscle again, how to flex that muscle and start doing those things, because it's all different. There's so many different aspects to this business, and so there's always something to work on. That continued improvement is what, one, keeps you in the business, and two, keeps you moving forward and getting more opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. And just like to end our conversation, I have one last question. You talked about like people starting their own thing, a podcast, a blog, or whatever it is that they want to start. Would you consider doing like some of these things right now, like a podcast, like just a show for you, or something on YouTube, even though you're already like in the field?
Yeah, no, definitely. I actually, so right now, one of the things that I do on the side is I actually have a podcast with the Las Vegas Raiders during training camp as they're preparing for their season ahead. So I've partnered with them on that one. It's a 9-episode series that we do. And then when that's done, I hop on their podcast a lot. I do a lot of radio hits out here. I'll join a lot of people that I know in the business doing radio. One of the other things that I would like to do is get into radio and start doing that along with what I do, on air in the sports sense too. So I'm always looking for opportunities like that and, trying to jump on and start those things. And so that's why, again, I partner with the Raiders and things like that. So I do many podcasts. I don't have one that's just mine, but yeah, I hop on there and do a lot with them. And I think at some point, that is something my boss and I are trying to start doing. We did it for a while. We were told to stop until we could really get it hammered in to be able to brand it and do it right, which I totally understand. And I think at some point we will be doing a podcast that's our own thing, because I think that's a viable thing and it's fun. My boss and I do it a lot. We do a segment called Beyond the Three. Well, our station is called Channel 3, so it's like Beyond the Three, of our station. And, my boss and I basically just chop it up about all things sports, and you get to have your opinion. You get to be yourself, because a lot of times when you're doing sports on TV, you only have this short amount of time. You have like a minute and a half to 2.5, 3 minutes if you're lucky to tell whatever story it is you're trying to tell, or to be able to wrap up this game or whatever the heck it is. I mean, if you're covering a game, you usually only have like 35 to 45 seconds worth of highlights to wrap up this entire game. That's not enough time to really dive into what happens. So a podcast or a different show that you create on YouTube allows you infinite amount of time to be able to dive into that. And so that's what's really appealing to me, because one of the things that I don't like about this business is that lack of time, especially for sports in a local newscast. You're not given the time to dive into things, I think, the way that you should be able to. And so that's what's super appealing to me about radio, podcasts, digital shows, things like that, is there's no time limit. So you have a half hour to an hour, or however the heck long you want to make your show, to dive into everything that you want to and really get your thoughts out there. And that part's definitely appealing.
Yeah, I feel like this media side, radio, podcast, and digital media, it's way more appealing nowadays. Like today, everybody has a podcast. Mm-hmm. I open my Instagram one day and every artist that I follow, I have a podcast right now. I have one also. Yeah. And I think it's kind of a trend, but if you take not that people don't take it serious, but if you take in a professional way, it's something very interesting, because people can listen to it whenever they can, or for how long they can. Even though it's like a 2-hour show, you can listen a half an hour here and half an hour later. And It's a very interesting part of journalism. I started journalism thinking that I was going to do print, and then I started doing more TV, and I was like, oh, TV is fun. And then I worked for our radio station last semester and started a podcast, and I was like, okay, so I think I finally found my niche.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a nice part of journalism right now to have all this creative freedom. Yeah.
There's so many more avenues and ways to do it now than there was, when I was coming out. Podcasting wasn't really a thing, even social media wasn't as big as it is now. I remember when I was a junior, when I had that first internship at Fox 11, Liz Habib, who was the sports anchor there, she forced me to get a Twitter account because I didn't have one. To me, looking back, I'm like, wow, I didn't have a Twitter. It's just weird. I couldn't do my job without a Twitter account. And so that's one of those things is it's wild how fast things change. And that's where I think, too, another thing for advice to anybody listening to this about where they want to go and how they want to get into business, figure out whatever that next thing is. Again, like you said, everyone has a podcast and that's super available. But find out whatever that next thing is that's going to blow up and be one of the first people to do it, because then you can really be on that ground up when it skyrockets. And that's how you end up making a name for yourself in this business. There's so many people now. It's you kind of get lost in the shuffle of so many podcasts out there, unless you're able to do something that's really going to draw people in. So finding out whatever that next thing is huge. So if you figure out whatever that is, you let me know.
Okay.
And I'm going to start doing it too.
Okay, I'll do it first, but then I'll let you in. No worries. Yeah, and so I just wanted to wrap up and say thank you so much, Jesse, for coming here today. It was really nice to talk to you and catch up after 1.5 years without interviewing you for every semester that we have the club.
Of course. I always love hopping on with you guys. And like I said, I'm always down to hop on with the class too. I like talking to everybody as they come up. So I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. And for everybody listening, thank you for listening to my podcast. And I'll see you guys on the next chapter.